With the Butt Kicker Gamer 2, what you see and what you hear is what you feel. Butt Kicker. The future is feeling.
It's that time once again here on RaceSpotTV, the Precision Racing League, GTP, LMP2 and GT3 series. We started the season in Germany and now we go back to Germany for round 3 at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. The Blancpain Endurance Series and World Endurance Championship layout with the faster chicane at the end of the lap. This is going to be a very challenging event for all of our drivers. It's going to be brought to you by myself, Reese Gardiner, with Ron Mons alongside me for the third round of the championship. Ron, this is going to be a fun one. I love the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. 3 classes of sports cars on track, though. It's going to be pretty cramped.
Oh, it absolutely will be. The Nürburgring Grand Prix layout, certainly, compared to the Nordschleife, it just feels like a go-kart track compared to that. So rather tiny compared to the Northern Loop, but here on the Grand Prix layout, gonna be a bit tight in terms of trying to find some space to deal with that lap traffic. So a whole lot of craziness that we're gonna be having over the racing action tonight.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The schedule, once again, checking out the early stages of the season. It's been a really entertaining first couple of weeks of this championship, but we are going to be bouncing back and forth between Europe and America in this schedule. Going to Road America for the 4th round with Monza for round 5. Watch out for turn 1 there. Long Beach, I said it both rounds so far. It's going to be absolutely incredible seeing them make their way around that tight street circuit and go into the home of sports car racing, Le Mans, for the 7th round before we round things off at Portugal and Belgium, Algarve and Spa. Looking at the championship standings in the GTP class, Brandon Wilson has won both rounds on the trot. He is going to be leading from Miguel Rios. Timothy Larson falling from 2nd place in the championship after a pretty terrible round at Daytona. Nathan Ray and Graham Wildman are there, very close on points, with Darian Roy just a bit further back, tied for 7th, 4 ways between O'Brien, McGill, Gallego, and Aaron Beaver. In the GTP teams standings, it's Aerokinetics and Night Blind Racing on top, with Tachyon SimSport chasing them. Pretty close between Solpic Precision Racing, Valhalla Motorsports, and Waterback Racing GTP. A very tight fight in this championship here. Amongst the LMP2 drivers, there's obviously some great form happening from Alex Caruso. 110 points to his name here. Again, he's won both rounds running, with Joshua Chinsky chasing him down 8 points behind, only 2 points separating Sam Shreves and Caleb Lehman. In the team standings, well, Alex Caruso is a part of the Hyperion Racing squad, but he doesn't have many teammates up there with him. So it means that SRTE is leading the team's championship in the LMP2 class. There's only 4 points between Hyperion and Waterback for 4th place, and only a single point separating Driven Performance Esports Pro and Tachyon SimSport LMP2. And finally, the GT3 class. Derek Heiberger He won the first round, finished second in round 2. Floyd Kerr finished second in round 1 and won round 2. It's basically a Hyperion top 3 lockout at the top of the drivers' standings. Behind, it is of course very close between Ostrich, Wyckoff, Brennan, Aguiar, Maturo and Costello. These standings can change in the blink of an eye, so we'll be keeping a very close eye on them. But Hyperion Racing dominating the GT3 team standings. They have locked out the podium at both rounds so far, and they'll be seeing if they can keep their run going here tonight at a race which is brought to you by many fantastic sponsors here at the Precision Racing League. Of course, Logitech G wheels and pedals are equipped with True Force feedback to help you feel the road and own the race. Use code PRECISION at checkout on logitechg.com for 5 to 10% off your purchase. Owned and operated by passionate sim racers, Advanced Sim Racing designs and builds the sturdiest and most durable aluminium profile racing simulation cockpits available in the market today. If you're a PRL member, you also get a 5% discount on ASR products using the Precision5 coupon code. Racebox offers mid and high-end button boxes for sim racing enthusiasts, from the casual gamer up to the most meticulous sim racing driver. Competitively priced and carefully handcrafted, Racebox's button boxes are an enjoyable addition to any sim racing setup. Visit raceboxsimracing.com. You also get a 5% discount there using the Precision5 coupon code. Bodkicker products add incredible immersion and realism to every game. Feel every nuance and truly put yourself in the driver's seat. Check them out at thebudkicker.com. Moradness is a performance lifestyle brand motivated by motorsport and founded by professional race car driver Daniel Morad. Check out moradness.com for more information. Mr. Hedge iRacing Photography. Capture your finest, proudest, or simply worst moments from your hobby in up to 8K resolution. A great addition to any sim room. MrHedge.co.uk. He's also on Facebook and Instagram. Last but not least, get ready to learn to be fast with Advanced Motorsports. Follow them on their socials to become a better driver. They're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Threads. Anywhere you could care to look. And with that, we can get into the action for tonight, Ron. The drivers are currently in qualifying, and we're waiting to see still who is going to get provisional pole with the best initial outlap.
And looking at these drivers, already a couple minutes on the board in this 10-minute long solo qualifying session where these drivers have 4 laps to try and get the job done. I will say, though, Reese, taking a brief look at how things looked in the practice session earlier on in the GTP category, it was Timothy Larson setting the fastest practice time at a 1:37.758. However, it was practically nothing between a vast majority of the field in the GTP category. In LMP2, it was Alex Crow leading it at the moment. He already has a qualifying time on the board, albeit that's about 2 seconds off of his practice time earlier on. And in GT3, it was Jim Feliz in the 5 who was the fastest in practice earlier on. But again, practice completely different. You got an hour and 40 in that practice session, so a lot more time in that practice session compared to this qualifying session for these drivers to get the job done. A lot more pressure riding on these drivers' shoulders. Let's see who's going to crack first.
Yeah, indeed. It's a 10-minute qualifying session, and each driver only gets 4 opportunities to set a lap time here. Ian Cabana, we're riding on board with in the 774, and we'll see what he can do here in the LMP2, running his way down the hill towards the southern hairpin. This is one of my favorite parts of the circuit. In fact, the entirety of the exit of the arena all the way to the chicane is one of my favorite pieces of racetrack in the entire world. That is so flowing, so fast. Still got those sort of old style curbs, you know. This is a Formula One circuit, but the curbs aren't as wide and flat as you'd expect from modern F1 venues. This track does date from the early to mid 1980s in many places, and Ian Cabana is riding those curbs beautifully in his LMP2. Luke Wallace, meanwhile, taking provisional pole for the moment in GT3, so it is still Hyperion Racing looking very good there, with Derek Heiberger in second place as we come up to demonstrate that fast chicane, the alternate layout. They use this for endurance races at the Nürburgring. You're in and out in a flash.
That chicane is absolutely terrifying. Just from our perspective in the commentary booth, Reese, looking at these drivers, looking to stamp and sending it, heading through that last chicane, oh so difficult. Anyone who goes for an overtake heading into that corner obviously does not want to see the checkered flag, because that tight chicane, that's tricky enough to pass in as is, but the fast chicane somehow makes it even more of a task. So these racers are looking to try and get the moves done in just about any other section of the racetrack that they possibly can. Turn 1 probably going to be a good overtaking opportunity. A turn 8 southern hairpin, as you said, going to be a good spot as well. But that chicane, that is going to be, that is off limits in terms of drivers trying to get some moves done there. Just making it through single file all by yourself is tricky enough as is.
Yeah, I've been through there many times, and it's a tough one. It's very easy to pick up an off-track or even potentially a slowdown, which is going to completely destroy your qualifying run. We're on board with Darian Roy right now in the GTP, 5th place at the moment, and you can see the pace of the GTP coming up the hill here. These guys are completely flat out through the Schumacher S here, and very late on the brakes indeed. But what I did notice is on the exit of the arena section earlier, he was suffering a little bit of oversteer. Of course, there's plenty of power that gets put to the ground in these GTPs with their hybrid system, but you'll need to be able to manage those tires through the race if you want to be successful. The Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit is curiously quite slippery compared to its big brother, the Nordschleife, just up there.
A little bit odd how that stuff works. I guess maybe because it's farther down south, there's a bit more humidity. I'm not a good meteorologist, you can tell, but still, it's kind of an odd track. It's a cool one, mind you, and certainly improvement compared to the old Südschleife layout that used to exist back in the 70s and 80s, well, 60s and 70s, I should say. The 80s was when a vast majority of the complex was redesigned, and we got the layout that we have today without the Mercedes AMG Arena, though. That originally was a quick little chicane, which occasionally caused some moments of concern. I think in the late 90s it was, back when F1 raced around here under the rather bizarre name of the Luxembourg Grand Prix, which is a whole other story in its own regard. That first section was just a quick little chicane, kind of like how the 24 hours of Nürburgring layout is of this southern part of the racetrack, but it's a track that has been rather set in its ways. It hasn't had too many changes ever since it was constructed in the 80s, and as you mentioned earlier on, Reese, you can still get a little bit of that 80s kick when driving around here in these modern day cars.
Yeah, and I think not least of that is the gravel being kicked up there by Luke Wallace on the exit of that corner. This is very much an old school track in many places. There's tarmac runoffs in the Mercedes Arena section, but everywhere else it is grass and gravel that greets you if you have a problem out there. Wallace rounding the final corner now, see if he can take provisional pole back from his teammate Derek Heiberger, and across the line he will come to set a 149.7. Actually 154.2, sorry, the timing took a bit to update there. It is still Derek Heiberger on provisional pole in GT3, only driver in the 153 second bracket. Here we are on board with Aiden Hill as he makes his way through the arena in the LMP2, and Aiden had a bit of a tough one at Daytona. He'll be wanting some redemption for this round here in the Eifel Mountains.
Yeah, looking to try and redeem himself at a track which I have a feeling, Reese, is going to be one where we see a bit more attrition than some of the other races we've seen thus far this season. You've got a lot of corners baked into this track. You mentioned earlier on, just talking about the traffic situation, how around this track with 16 corners in all, according to iRacing's track map, it's going to be really tough to find any sort of space to even breathe around here. So in these GTP cars, it's a quick lap to be sure, and it's going to be one that's made even more terrifying when we've got lap traffic encounters, and when we reach the point in this hour-long race we have coming up where the GT3s and the LMP2s are right by each other as the GTPs are coming up. That's going to be where we probably see a lot of drivers fall out. So I think, as much as it is a worn-out saying in the world of motorsports to finish first you have to finish, it's really going to ring true here tonight.
Indeed, Aiden Hill a bit frustrated there because he couldn't make it to the finish line before the qualifying session ended. It's a hard cut to the end of the session. Well, Now we can enter the warm-up, and in this 5-minute phase before the race session ticks over, we can check out a couple of our pole laps from our classes here today. We have our 3 pole sitters sorted. Timothy Larson taking pole position from Brandon Wilson. That is very significant. I think that's Larson's first pole of the season. Alex Crow on pole again in LMP2, and Derek Heiberger on pole once more in GT3. Here we are then on board with Alex Crow, who's going to jump in with us here for a look at his lap. Hello, Alex. And, well, I mean, 3rd pole in a row. Certainly, in terms of 1 lap pace, you've got this sorted over the field, but this track has some very subtle challenges.
Hey, thanks for having me. I think you have the wrong Alex. It was Alex Caruso that had the first 2 poles.
My apologies.
Close enough.
Alex. Yeah, Alex Crow. My apologies. Yes, it's a difficult track, isn't it? You know, making your way to the start-finish line and making your way down to turn 1. Cold brakes, cold tires. It's going to be a factor at the start of the race.
Absolutely, especially in LMP2. I feel like this season, this track especially, it's really hard to get the tire temp going. Usually takes a couple laps to really get them up to temperature, get them up to full race speed. Thankfully, being at the front, I won't have to worry about anyone checking up in front of me.
Yes, well, I think traffic, Ron and I were discussing, is going to be a big factor, especially in the middle phase of the race. You don't get many opportunities to rest on this track. The straights are quite short.
No, absolutely not, especially lots of GTPs, lots of LMP2s, and lots of GT3s. For the most part, traffic here, as soon as we catch the GT3s, that's going to be about when the GTPs are going to be catching us, so it's going to be hitting us from both directions as soon as we hit one.
And coming up through the S's section at the sort of middle end of the lap, the decision to use the endurance chicane, quite a popular one amongst the drivers, and I think everyone prefers that to the Grand Prix chicane. But if you're behind someone, or if you're trying to get past by someone, then it's certainly going to be a difficult one.
Yeah, you know what? Everyone's going to have the same traffic. It's way more fun to hit that high speed than it is slow speed on the GP track, so I'll take this one every day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, low grip surface. It's going to be a difficult race for you, Alex. Congratulations on your first pole position of the year. I'm sorry for the flub bringing you in, and best of luck in the race, mate.
Awesome. Thanks, Reese.
Alex Crow there on pole in LMP2, and then we can move through to Derek Heiberger, who has taken GT3 pole once again. Derek, looks like that Acura is serving you nicely at a variety of different tracks so far.
Yeah, it's been great so far. Honestly, I was a little worried about this qualifying session. Through practice, the track kept coming, like, just going away from me. So the car kept understeering, things weren't working very well, so I went really aggressive on the quali set, somehow kept it on the road.
Yeah, somehow indeed. But, you know, looking at your pole lap on board here, it looks quite smooth through the Mercedes Arena section. The GT3s tend to deal with those slow corners very differently to the LMP2s and the GTPs, and it's all about trying to preserve as much of that mechanical grip as you can.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting track to set up for, especially considering that first sector, because we have a lot of high-speed sweeping corners where you want the car nice and stiff, but you lose so much time in that first sector if you can't get the mechanical side to hook up.
Yeah, it's a bit of a compromise, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Your way down to the southern hairpin and up through the S's, which is where you say you need that stiff car. How are you going to be feeling when the GTPs and LMP2s come around to lap you? Because it's a narrow circuit and there's not much room.
It's a little tricky, especially considering through that middle sector with the S's. We're not that slow through there. I'm flat through the Schumacher S, for example. So it's very difficult to have a car good on the inside, but we'll make it work.
Indeed you will. And coming up to the final section of the lap, just give us an eye into potential strategy permutations for this one, because you know, I think it's going to be following roughly the same pattern as previous rounds, but traffic probably going to affect your strategy a bit more.
Yeah, honestly, I think if we see a clump of prototypes coming up in the mirror and we're close to the pit window, I think it makes sense to pit early and just try to stay out of the traffic as much as possible.
All right, well, there's some information there from Derek Heiberger. Thanks very much for joining us, mate. Good luck.
Yep, thank you.
Derek Heiberger on pole in GT3, but first we have to go through the rest of the grid to get to him. Timothy Larson is on pole in GTP. He'll be very happy with that one, but his championship rival Brandon Wilson alongside him on the front row. Austin McGill, a fantastic qualifying performance, third alongside Nathan Ray in the Solpec Precision Racing GTP. Bradley Holly, most successful driver in PRL history. He's going to start in 5th place alongside the ever-popular Graham Wildman. Aidan Hill and Jeff Evans on the 4th row, Miguel Rios and Darian Roy rounding out your GTP top 10. Stephen Finch and Casey O'Brien are 11th and 12th. Joseph Blommel and Leo Lung 13th and 14th, with Matt Benson and Aaron Beaver on the 8th row, with Mauricio Jaramillo Gallego rounding out the 2 Ferraris at the back of the GTPs. Alex Crow on pole for the first time this season in the Majors Esport LMP2, but Alex Caruso, the pole man at the first 2 rounds, is certainly going to be challenging him. Eric Harmon and Caruso's teammate Sam Shreves in the 2nd row there. Kurt Goodson and Ian Cabana, 5th and 6th. 7th place, Kevin Bergquist alongside Justin Barrera, who got the podium last round at Daytona. He's certainly going to be happy with that. Matt Brewer and Kevin Burrows, 9th and 10th, with Evan Henneman and Dave Seats rounding out our 12-car LMP2 field. And then we move to GT3. Heiberger and Wallace. It's now a top 2 lockout for Hyperion Racing. Jim Feliz and Evan Mackay in the SRTE cars on the 2nd row. SRTE once again in the orange cars on the 3rd row with Costello and Costello. In 7th place, Adam Ostrich and Jeff Kaufhold sharing that. Devin Young and Matthew Maturo rounding out the top 10. Matthew Wyckoff and David Schmidt, 11th and 12th. 13th, Bryce Bombeck alongside Robert McGeehan in the sole Mustang in the field. Good on him for sticking it out in that one. Willie Brennan and Eduardo Aguiar round out our field as the GTPs are already going, and Timothy Larson has gotten off to a fantastic start. Green flag flies, away we go, and keep an eye out for turn 1. It is tight, it is tough, there's a dip in the middle. You got to be careful as 2nd place already having a slight problem there through turn 1. A little snap for Brandon Wilson, Ron.
Yeah, some drivers already having some sideways snaps. Meanwhile, the green flag is down. The drivers are on their way in the LMP2 category, hoping that we can go 2 for 2 at the start of this race and have the P2s make it through the first turn clean. Looking through, trying to see if there's any sort of side-to-side, wheel-to-wheel, and door-to-door contact. Looks like they make it through clean in the LMP2s. Meanwhile, keeping our fingers crossed that they can do the same in the GT3s.
Yep, GT3's making their way through the first corner. Wallace has taken pole position from Derek Heiberger. Jim Feliz and Evan McKay still holding on to 3rd and 4th there, as we have a bit of difficulty for Kurt Goodson and Justin Barrera in the LMP2s ever so briefly. Barrera making his way up into 2nd. A really good run from him. Got to wonder if there's going to be any further runs forward there. Alex Caruso has taken the lead, but Alex Crow having some problems as there's Austin McGill, who's gone off there in the GTPs as they come round to the 2nd half of the lap, falling all the way to the back of the GTP field, joining Darian Roy and Stephen Finch, who had troubles on lap 1. Aidan Hill now trying to find his way past Graham Wildman, and Graham Wisely backing out there on the way into the chicane.
Yeah, he wants absolutely no parts of a side-by-side battle heading off through the final finish. Chicane doubly so at the very start of this race, and also considering the fact he just had one of the drivers right around him in the GTP category go off the track, heading off into turn number 11 a couple of moments beforehand. The greasy cold tires in these GTP cars coming back to bite these drivers on the butt as side-by-side heading down into turn 1 with Evans.
Yes, indeed. Well, Jeff Evans is working his way through nicely. He's up 1 position now. Graham Wildman and Timothy Larson are the only drivers in the GTP field to still occupy the same position they started in. I've just gone back to check what on earth happened to Alex Crow, who took pole position in the LMP2s. He was out before the green flag had even flown. Here it is on the replay. You see Crow there on the outside of Caruso, and there was a lock-up behind. The second Hyperion LMP2 hit him off at the last corner.
Yeah, to have an incident like that before you even grab the green, that is a kick in the shins if ever you see one in a race like this. Thankfully, though, despite having a dusty car with all the dust getting kicked up in the air through that trip through the gravel trap, as that's a spin for Stephen Finch a little bit farther down the line in the GTP class. Getting back to the point that I was going to mention, as much as there's a lot of dust on that car, he has a very fast one, so we see another replay of that with Darian Roy getting a piece of that action as well in the GTPs. But there's still plenty of time left in this race for some of these drivers who have had some difficulties at the very beginning to be able to dust themselves off and maybe find themselves in a good position come time for the end.
Yeah, looks like Austin McGill just locked the rear brakes there, as back in the GT3s, Adam Ostrich flipping up into 7th, but then back into 8th as the defense from the McLaren on the inside goes for it. Devin Young almost pushing him off the track there in the silver McLaren, and then the Ferrari, the Valhalla Ferrari behind, trying to get things done here. Jeff Kaufhold, who's still maintaining his starting position here. Lovely little pack for 7th on back in GT3, and the Valhalla cars are pressuring these two here. They almost come together on the way into the left-hander. They have to go single file on the way out and try and pick up a slipstream into the chicane.
Yeah, and the slipstream heading down here, usually pretty powerful in these race cars, but we gotta see if these drivers even gonna think about using it. I don't know about you, Reese, but the final chicane heading through this track, it's the lesser of two evils when you think about it, because you've got the alternative layout that we're running here, which is so fast that it just feels like you're going through there in the blink of an eye. Then you've got the tighter version of the chicane that's more primarily used, like Formula One used it back in 2020. That version of the chicane, incredibly tight, incredibly clunky as well. So as much as you can get a move done heading into the chicane when it's a little bit tighter, that's still not an easy ask either. So that flat-out blast right towards the end of this lap, always tough to try and see if you can even think about getting a move done, because if you do, you need to get it done before you even think about that chicane.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to make sure that you've set up the move and you're at least a little bit ahead of the car you're trying to pass before you enter that braking zone. Well, here's Bradley Holly, meanwhile, making up one position himself, thanks to the incident for Austin McGill, and currently P4 trying to chase down Nathan Ray and Brandon Wilson there, but I think he's going to have to worry a bit more about Graham Wildman in his mirrors. Bradley Holly is certainly no stranger to having pressure put on him. He is the winningest driver in the history of the Precision Racing League. Further back, the number 51 of Jeff Evans. He's run right pack here with Aiden Hill at the head of it, Miguel Rios in the Ferrari 499P, and Casey O'Brien putting the pressure on here in the initial laps. It's important for the GTPs to sort out their positions now, because they're about to come up on the GT3 traffic. They're not too far away, so need to make sure that you're in the position you expect to be. Casey O'Brien decides he's going to try and make the move now, but the outside line is often better at this bottom end of the circuit.
And that's usually the preferred line. These drivers going to certainly use that preferred line all throughout a vast majority of this race. We may have a side-by-side fight, though, heading off into the braking zone. Turn number 11, side-by-side, nearly running off into the dirt, as going off the track a little bit farther up the road. Who is that?
Hill. That's Aiden Hill. That's gone off into the tarmac runoff there. Looks like no damage on the car, but that is a massive mistake. I think similar to what happened to Darian Roy on lap 1. He potentially lost the rear end of that high-speed turn. We'll have to wait and see exactly what happened there.
And it was contact. Yeah, it was a punt heading down into turn number 11. Aiden Hill going off the circuit in dramatic fashion with no way to avoid it, as side-by-side racing for the final podium spots, heading off into turn 1 and now into 2.
Yeah, man, that's a shame. I couldn't see exactly what that Ferrari was that hit him, but that's going to be really tough there as Graham Wildman makes his way past Bradley Holly, and the position is changed there between Brandon Wilson and Nathan Ray. We have a new second-place runner in Brandon Wilson. Now, Brandon is used to winning this season. He crossed the line in first at Hockenheim. He did the same at Daytona, and now he's going to try and chase down Timothy Larson, but it's going to be a tough job 4 seconds as the gap for the lead, as problems again in LMP2. That's Kurt Goodson that's had a problem, and I see Kevin Bergquist has potentially had an issue too.
And just to tie a bow around the storyline involving that Aiden Hill wild off-track moment hang off into turn number 11, it was Miguel Rios that hit him. As you can see, the side-by-side contact involving Kurt Goodson. I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that was Eric Hartman on the inside. Those two coming to blows heading off through the final corner, but it was Rios that sent Aiden Hill in the number 47 GTP off the track.
Indeed it was. Now Eric Harmon finds himself in 3rd place, and Justin Barrera is right on the back of him here. This is a rollicking battle for 2nd place in LMP2. Alex Caruso is out to a magnificent lead in LMP2, something that he is very used to getting, but they'll be squabbling over the scraps here for the last 2 spots on the podium. Let's see if Justin Barrera can be a podium threat here like he was at Daytona.
And certainly a lot of time left to prove yourself if you are one of these drivers. It's been a very hectic start, but we still got over 51 minutes left on the clock. So a lot of time left for these racers to show us what they're made out of and show us what their cars are feeling like at this point in time. I will say, though, in terms of trying to manage the way this race can go, there's a lot of stuff these drivers have to keep in mind. They have to think of the lap traffic, which I will note is definitely going to be coming up in the not too distant future here. I'll actually go and see where Timothy Larson, our overall race leader, is. He's already into the GT3 traffic. As you can see, more drivers in the GTPs dealing with them. So traffic already becoming a factor. Have to talk about that all throughout this race and trying to manage the moves and get them done successfully and cleanly without a mark on your race car. But it's also just important to try and maintain a good mindset throughout this race. You don't want to get caught up in the red mist. You may have red-looking numbers or whatever it may be on your race car, but you don't want to get caught up in the red mist because that'll end in disaster, as we've got a 3-car gaggle in the GT3s going side by side through 11 and 12.
Yeah, Devin Young had to let a GTP go on the inside of the Schumacher S, and now he's involved here with Jeff Kaufhold. Contact on the exit of the right-hander, as we've got 3 more GTPs making their way through. Graham Wildman, followed by Bradley Holly and Miguel Rios, and throw Jeff Evans in there as well. A big dive behind. David Schmidt making up a position on Matthew Maturo, taking advantage of the GT3s getting held up there. Those 2 Porsches will be trading positions for some time yet in the background, but they get to the start-finish straight just in time for some clean passes there, and Rios is now right on the back of Bradley Holly. Can he get it done coming into the first corner? You got to be very careful through here. It's so tight. It's a wide corner, but it's one line fits all. Bradley Holly on the outside was able to pick up the power earlier and defend the position.
Yeah, drivers looking to try and put on a defensive masterclass, which around a racetrack like this where there aren't any slam dunk easy overtaking opportunities, easy certainly being relative in a race like this, but it's putting on good defensive drive can be really vital for these racers. As we take a look at a moment to see what happened to Casey O'Brien, big contact heading down, and that's taking himself in a GT3 car off in dramatic fashion. I was wondering what happened to the driver of the number 28 car, because he was running strongly, solidly inside the top 10. However, he's dropped down like a rock, and that was the reason why.
Yeah, it looks like that was Bryce Bombeck potentially in the GT3 that got involved there. That's a real shame. Aaron Beaver, meanwhile, in another Ferrari. Oh, he absolutely lost the rear end into the chicane there. And it's one of the places where you need the front end to respond. Meanwhile, Kevin Bergquist, we saw him stopped on the outside of the circuit. He got kicked off the server initially, some internet issues for Kevin, but I think he decided that it was best to get back in and try and get a finish. Leo Lung as well getting turned around. This is absolute chaos out here right now. We've seen cars spinning all over the place as the prototypes try to make their way through the GT3s.
Yeah, the prototypes running through the GT3s reminds me of just looking in the parking lot of a Walmart on Black Friday. It is absolute pandemonium. It's a madhouse around here, and these drivers looking to maintain that craziness as best as they possibly can. You don't want it to get too out of hand. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a world of trouble, and these racers are not hoping for that at all. Doubly so that we're less than 13 minutes into this 1 hour long race. But I got to say, one of the maddest classes that we've seen thus far has to be this 4-car gaggle that we see in LMP2. These drivers giving us a really good fight to talk about. However, this is definitely going to get shuffled up when we see the GTP runners start to encounter these sister prototype cars.
And look at the car at the rear of the train. That's Alex Crow, the pole sitter who got spun off on the run to the start. He's made a fantastic recovery, and with the battling happening ahead of him, he could get 2 for 1 here. Have to wait and see how this works out here between Eric Harmon and Justin Barrera, trying to get some side draft off each other and get as close as they can here. And man, little contact in the braking zone. Here comes Crow. He's going to get 1 position here. The 617 having to go wide to let him go, and Crow gets it. So that's at least 1 position there for the 990. Just goes to show the battling in LMP2 is always where it's at.
Yeah, these LMP2 cars, I don't know what it is, Reese. I gotta say, when the LMP2 car was first introduced into iRacing a couple of years ago, I bought it and fell in love with it almost immediately. These LMP2 cars, absolute hoots to drive in the sim, to invoke a little bit of 1950s radio terminology there. But they put on some great battling as well. It doesn't matter what the racetrack is, what sort of weather conditions we have in the play as well. They just put on some great racing, as that's an odd off-track moment from Jeff Evans in the number 51. What in the world happened there?
It looked like the rear end just completely failed. The wing came off. There was contact from the Cadillac behind. Yeah, that's a big hit there. I don't know. That might have been Darian Roy there in the Cadillac, or the other Valhalla prototype, potentially Austin McGill. Not too sure of the identity of the aggressor there, but regardless, that is Jeff Evans out of the race for the time being. He is back in the pits and taking repairs, getting it towed as there's contact there on the back of Justin Barrera. Alex Crow giving him a little hurry up into the chicane. He wants to move forward.
Yeah, and the real question is, will he be able to move forward is the real question. While get done clean, though, I will say, speaking of not getting a move done clean, it was actually Austin McGill who was involved in that contact with Evans and the GTPs heading off into the final corner a few moments ago. But in the LMP2s, look at that, the dive heading down into turn 1.
Oh, Alex Crow is driving, I think, with a bit of that red mist that you were talking about earlier on. He's certainly looking to try and fight his way forward here, but the gap is continuing to build for Alex Caruso. It's out to 10 seconds now, and I think the problem here for Crow is that he's stuck behind Barrera and Brewer at the moment. He can't drive at 100% of his pace, so we need to see if this battle can be sorted out soon and see if Alex Crow can catch up Alex Caruso. Regardless, this is a great battle to watch, and Matt Brewer and Justin Barrera are going to do everything they can to hold on to these podium places.
Yeah, it is a great battle to see from our perspective for the commentary booth. From these drivers' perspectives behind the wheel, though, it's probably a little bit tense, but no one's probably more tense in their pit crews looking at the side-by-side racing and being them banging and roughing each other up, heading down into some of the corners around this racetrack. We may see a side-by-side fight. I thought we were going to see one heading off into turn number 11. Turn 11 seeming to be a good overtaking opportunity that some of these racers are looking to try and use, as looking at a GT3 Mustang kind of splitting up this fight a teeny tiny bit. They're still pretty much vacuum sealed together, though, so no harm, no foul. But we may have a case of deja vu yet again, heading off into turn 1 in a few moments' time. Let's see if this fight is going to heat up yet again. Oh, as we see an early call to come into the pits.
Okay, so Alex Crow is making his way into the pit lane at the moment. There's no flag showing up for him, no mechanical black flag or anything like that, but I think he might have a little bit of damage. This is curiously early. He will have to make another pit stop, it looks like. The LMP2s have no fuel tank restriction. They last about half an hour and change, so only 1 pit stop usually required for the LMP2s, but this is just too early for Alex Crow to get to the finish from here.
I gotta wonder if there's some sort of damage on that race car that remained after that start of the race collision that was maybe slowing him down, possibly. I'm not too sure, because, I mean, he was showing a heck of a lot of pace. I mean, hey, he was going for some, for lack of a better term, he was going for some gunslinging moves on some of his competitors, so he was feeling really good about his chances and probably feeling good about his race car, but coming into the pits rather early, unless that car is going to be fueled with just gasoline fumes and the Lord's Prayer come time for the checkered flag, there's no way that he's going to be able to make it home with this early stop. So really perplexed by that one.
Yeah, I am, and I remember also that that Crow got into the back of Justin Barrera coming into the chicane. I think that's where he picked up the front end damage, and I did see the front bumper getting changed in the pits there for Mr. Crow here. So there was definitely damage. His aerodynamics were affected, maybe his suspension as well. So you know, fuel up the car, get it repaired, maybe get some new tires on potentially if you want to do that, and jump on forward. But I think he'll be going backwards at the end. He will have to pit once more, but it is crucially only going to be a short stop. Meanwhile, this is a battle running between our GTPs here. Acura, Cadillac and Ferrari. This is Stephen Finch, Joseph Blommel and Mauricio Gallego in the new Ferrari 499P. Mauricio has been in and around the top 10 of the GTP field. Blommel trying his best to hold on here. He was just passed by Stephen Finch, in fact. So this is yet another three-way fight that could work out in the favor of the Ferrari, as it's very wide for Blommel coming through the final corner.
And let's see if that's going to cost him a little bit of time in that number 78 car. Will it result in a loss of position? Oh, you can see go for the dive heading down into turn number 1 is a Ferrari nearly coming to blows, but they get through there surprisingly clean, and now single file out through turn number 2. I was just going to say, though, another thing to add in terms of the feathers in the cap for that final chicane being as tricky as it is. I just noticed as we're following the number 78 car of Blommel, the bump heading in there, as never mind, we got the side-by-side fighting coming out of the corner and now heading off into turn number 6.
Oh, around the outside for Gallego, and he manages to get the inside for the next corner. Gently does it through this right-hander and out onto the straight. This is going to be a very hard battle coming into the hairpin between these two. Let's see if Mauricio is brave on the brakes. Not much rubber there on the inside. He has to give it up to Joseph Blommel again. That's allowed Stephen Finch to absolutely streak away from them. If we're still talking GTP, I want to draw your attention to the leader ever so briefly. Timothy Larston, making his way through GT3 traffic, actually ran into the back of a car through a very fast corner, and it doesn't look like he's picked up too much damage, but it's definitely hurt his gap to Brandon Wilson. It's under 3 seconds now.
Yeah, that's a very good point to raise there, Reese. I'm going to do a little bit of investigative journalism and see what sort of lap times he's been setting in as of late, currently being affected by lap traffic heavily as I jump to him in the sim, dealing with LMP2s and GT3s. So I'm curious as to whether or not his loss in pace has been down to something like the traffic encounters, or whether it has been a genuine loss of pace because of some damage on that race car. I'm going to take a look very briefly here, and if there's any sort of on-track action as I'm taking a look away from the feed, you can jump in whenever you want, Reese. But I'm looking through in terms of the pace. Larson set his best lap of the race on lap 9 at 138.7, but ever since then a 139.1, a 140.3, and last time by a 139.9. So I think that pace sort of bleed off a little bit in that number 12 car. Still has a 3.6 second gap though, so I guess no harm, no foul in that regard, as that gap is still maintaining a good cushion. But look at that, terrifyingly close coming out of turn number 11 with the GT3.
Yeah, it looks like that was Jim Feliz there that he was making his way past, and well, now actually no, it was one of the Costellos. Now he's just found his way past Evan McKay and Jim Feliz there for third in GT3. But yeah, you're looking at that car and you're not seeing any visual damage, but he has made contact with a couple of GT3s thus far, so we might have to monitor Larson going forward here. Brandon Wilson could take 3 from 3 so far in the season if things don't work out for him. Meanwhile, the number 48 LMP2 here of Sam Shreves, he's got Ian Cabana up ahead of him and getting pressured by Evan Henneman as the GTPs make their way through, and all 3 classes are together on track at the moment. The GTPs with the magnificent straight line speed, the LMP2s struggling to find a way in between these 2 classes.
Yeah, this is a point that I raised earlier on when we were still in qualifying, talking about this multi-class convergence with the GTPs, LMP2s, and GT3s. That could have ended in absolute disaster a couple of moments ago. Side-by-side racing, heading off through the first sector. You can see Ian Cabana on the inside and getting that move done to slip his way up into fifth. Sam Shrevs, though, certainly feeling the burn in all of that action. Maybe go for the move yet again, as he got more traffic to contend with a GT3. Maybe some 3-1 action, though, heading off into the corners. That could have ended in absolute disaster, as now Evan Heineman has gotten involved in this fight. The number 39 car should be noted at this point in time. Feels like an appropriate time to bring up this stat. I was crunching the numbers earlier on in this broadcast, Reese, and I realized that with 45 cars around this track, that according to iRacing is 3.15 miles long, that works out to one car about every 370 feet. So talk about no room to breathe. Holy cow.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's actually really crazy. It just shows how cramped this track is getting. And this is the best attended series in the Precision Racing League. We have an amazing amount of cars that started this one. It was above 50 cars for the first 2 rounds, 45 starters for this one, but still magnificent numbers. So we have a huge number of drivers trying to share this track, trying to work their way around each other and be very careful on their way through. 36 minutes to go, and we see a stop happening there from Ian Cabana. I think he will be able to make it home from here. About 36 minutes or so. Yeah, that's roughly in the margin for the maximum amount of time you can run on a fuel tank in that Dallara P217.
And here's a question for you, Reese, and you may have to draw some experience from the first 2 rounds of the season to try and formulate a response to this question that I've got for you. In terms of the LMP2s, considering they find themselves probably having to give a lot more than the GTPs and the GT3s when it comes to lap traffic encounters, don't want to run into the back of the slower GT3s and don't want to get themselves side by side with a slowing GTP, they're probably lifting off a little bit more. So I'm curious as to whether or not, considering the heavy traffic that the LMP2 contenders will have to deal with all throughout this race, will they actually get slightly better fuel mileage around a race like this, as we see some contact with a GTP and a GT3?
And Matthew Maturo getting turned around there. Yeah, I think you're right. LMP2's in a good position to fuel save around rounds here. So yeah, all of that traffic that you're working your way through, having to give up, having to, you know, if you want to pass a GT3 but you got a GTP coming up on you, maybe just lift, allow the GTP to go through, and then you go through on the GT3, stuff like that. It all adds up. You're only saving a tiny bit of fuel there, but it all adds up over the course of 1 hour. So the LMP2s could extend their fuel stints quite a bit from there, as we keep our eyes peeled on Miguel Rios and Austin McGill here. Ferrari versus Cadillac in GTP, as they're making their way through to Luke Wallace and Derek Heiberger, who still hold on to the top 2 spots in GT3. Hyperion are in control of the GT3 class, as they have been at Hockenheim and Daytona. No dramas from either of them, but McGill is trying his best to get his way past Rios here. No passing opportunity into this part of the arena. He'll have to be gearing up his exit here and potentially find a way through at the southern hairpin.
And that's a very good point to raise, talking about the first half of this lap and how through the arena section, there's really no way to get past your competitors. But once we go down into the southern half of the track, heading into turn number 6 and 7, we saw those 2 racers go through a couple of moments ago. Here now into one of the heaviest braking zones around the track of turn number 8. And I have to say, I'm with you, a very fun corner to drive around as well, with a little bit of banking helping these racers out as well. A good overtaking opportunity, but it looks like neither of these drivers are going to use it. I say this knowing fully well that it's probably going to age like milk. I'm curious as to whether or not these racers are maybe thinking about taking things a bit easier than they have done in the first 27 minutes. I say that knowing fully well that it could very much so age like milk.
Well, I think you do have a good point there, because, like, the first phase of traffic is now effectively over, right? We're not seeing any LMP2s or GT3s in front of these guys. They have the track to themselves. They can fight amongst themselves. It is an opportunity for them to take it a bit easier in terms of trying to find their way past many cars at a time, but then that frees up the mental energy to try and battle with your rival and get yourself in front by the time the next lot of traffic comes.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to raise in terms of trying to make hay while the sun is shining, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
Getting the moves done as you don't have the LMP2s and the GT3s acting as a thorn in the side to some of these racers. I mean, from a GTP's perspective, dealing with traffic, doubly so around a tight, twisty racetrack with tight confines like this one is here, dealing with traffic as you're trying to get some moves done in class, it's about as sour of an experience as drinking a glass of orange juice after brushing your teeth. So these racers looking to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, very sour taste can be left in your mouth by the end of one of these rounds if you're on the wrong side of battles. Jeff Kaufhold, meanwhile, 9th place in GT3's got Ostrich and Wyckoff up ahead of him, and Matthew Wyckoff is his teammate, and oh no, that's not going to be good for him. That left-hander, I completely understand why that happened to Wyckoff. I can't tell you the amount of times I've driven through that corner and the rear end has just gone on me. Matthew Wyckoff will obviously be fuming about that, and Jeff Kaufhold will be frustrated due to contact with his teammate there at Valhalla Motorsports. But regardless, it looks like they've avoided the worst of it. Maybe some minor damage for Jeff Kaufhold, but they will keep going as is.
Yeah, I think the Kaufhold car may just have a teeny tiny bit of damage, nothing major, probably just cosmetic more than anything else. So just a little bit of polish may get at the carbon fiber on the front end of that race car. But very good point to raise talking about turn number 3 around this track. Turn 2 and turn 3 through that arena section. I don't know about you, Reese, but these corners feel oh so tricky to try and psych out because it feels like it is flat as a pancake. It feels like you're blind heading through these corners as well. And it also feels like they simply do not end. And when you got some cars around you, making it even harder and acting as a thorn in your side, gonna make it doubly tricky. But side-by-side racing, dealing with some LMP2 traffic at the same time. These two drivers at GTP giving us one heck of a battle.
What a move there! What a move from Austin McGill. He geared it up around the outside of Miguel Rios there, and that's the classic move there, coming down the hill. Outside for the preceding corner becomes the inside for the next one, and the Cadillac is through. That is fantastic. Awesome stuff. But yeah, you're right. It's my experience as well. The arena section, particularly turn 2, it's very deceiving because you think that you have to take it slower than you think. You're so dialed in to not getting on the power too early because you don't want to understeer. It's an off-camber corner that crests a hill. But then you realize, oh, I could have gotten on the power way earlier. There's still plenty of track there on the exit. It is a very tricky section of the circuit.
I gotta say, and this is a very odd comparison, but turn number 2 around this racetrack, heading through it, and just, it feels like you see absolutely nothing in the horizon when you're looking at the cockpit of any sort of race car. It could be a Formula 3 car, it could be a GT3 car, doesn't really matter. You still get just about the same view heading through turn 2 either way. I have been in the middle of Nebraska here in the U.S. Nebraska, mind you, a state that is just about 50% dust and 50% bowl, and I feel like I've seen more stuff on the horizon than some of these race cars do heading through turn 2. Just such a hard corner to try and psych out, adding to the challenge of this racetrack, which may be one of the trickiest from this entire season.
Yeah, indeed. You know, the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit gets a bad rap because, I mean, you know, it's right next to the Nordschleife, the most famous racetrack in the world. But it is a fantastic circuit in its own right, and I think in that sense it is quite underrated. It certainly produces some fantastic racing and plenty of drama, as we've seen so far tonight. we are past the halfway point of the race, and the majority of our fields have not come into the lane yet. Our GT3 leaders haven't come in. There's been quite a few of our LMP2s that have decided to make their way in, but aside from that, only one GTP with a scheduled pit stop 4 laps ago from Leo Lung, who I believe had some damage as well. So these guys are trying to push it as far as they can and try and extend this initial stint.
Yeah, at this point in time, these drivers rolling the dice and hoping they don't get some snake eyes. Looking at that, that's a Ferrari coming down pit lane. So some more drivers coming into the pits, this time in the GTPs. And you'll have to answer this question for me, Reese. How's this strategy content going to look in that GTP class compared to the P2s?
Well, I reckon that the LMP2s are all going to be coming in right about now. In the next 5 minutes, you're going to be seeing all the rest of the LMP2s come into the lane. The GTPs, I think, could go maybe another 5 or 10 minutes before they have to really think about it. But it looks like Miguel Rios and Matt Benson have decided that it is time for them to make their GTP pit stops there. Flicking our way forward to our GTP leader, Timothy Larson, making his way out onto the back stretch. He has got a GT3 ahead of him in the form of Jim Feliz, and also the recovering Alex Crow, who's still trudging away out there in the 990 LMP2. Bit of a slow up there for Mr. Larson, but he doesn't elect to go for the pits just yet. He is driving to a number, I think. He's just looking to get this stint as extended as he can so that he can push as hard as possible right at the end.
Yeah, I think this is a very well-calculated drive from Timothy Larson, and I mean, he certainly has the pace to try and do it, dealing with some traffic still heading off now through the arena section. That's some more LMP2 cars coming down pit lane. But talking about Larson and the way he's put together this race thus far, and really this race meeting period was the fastest car in practice in the GTPs, obviously grabbed the pole, and has led essentially since the drop of the green flag. He has put on a really good drive in that number 12 car. So if anyone's going to go about this race in a rather formulaic way, for lack of a better term, it's going to be a driver like Larson, who has the pace and has the muscles to flex, to go to his competitors and be like, hey, I could run this race exactly how I designed it. No matter what you drivers do, I can still end up with a checkered flag. But we've got some GTPs still coming into the pits. That trickle of cars coming down pit lane very much beginning.
Yeah, that's Gallego in the Tachyon Ferrari, the next of the GTPs to throw up the flag and say, yes, I am done with this stint. Let's see how I go towards the end. Meanwhile, the GT3 lead still in the hands of Luke Wallace, and he's actually gained a bit on Derek Heiberger with all of the traffic making their way through. I think he's had a bit of better luck with GTPs making their way through than Heiberger has. And we also got to point out it is a bit of a stalemate for the GTP lead as well. The gap between Larson and Wilson is hovering around 4 to 5 seconds at times. So I think Larson is just trying his best to keep that gap going, as the Mustang at the end of the field here of Robert McGeehan. I'm still impressed that he's stuck it out with the Mustang. It hasn't been the most popular car choice this season. We saw a few drivers turn up with Mustangs at the first round, but they changed their cars for round 2. That's someone going off at turn 1 up ahead of these guys. Who on earth is that? That's Leo Lung. That lilac Cadillac is not having a great time out there. He's already completed his pit stop, so he's not going to be able to gain any time back by changing his strategy from here. Well, but crucially, 4th place in GTP, Bradley Holly, has just come in, and he was all alone on track at the time. So we'll see if this closes up the GTP field some.
Yeah, only time will tell how all this stuff is going to affect the GTP battles. We have some more drivers coming down into the pits in the GTP category. That trickle still very much on as we get the view from Bradley Holly. From his perspective behind the wheel of that race car, gotta say, it's kind of looking like a YouTube video from about 2008, but nevertheless, nice to get this view from his perspective, looking up to try and see how things are shaking out for him. Coming at the pits, running in 9th at the moment in that GTP GTP 184 Acura, and he rejoins the racetrack. I gotta ask you as well, Reese, in terms of the GTP pit stops, how much of these drivers are going to be feeling the burn in terms of the laps coming out?
Yeah, that is the question. I mean, tires start very cold, but I don't think there's going to be tire changes. The tires tend to last quite a long time in these cars, so it really comes down to fuel. Bradley Holly with a 14.4 second pit stop. Nathan Ray with the quickest of the GTP stops so far at 12.8 seconds, but there's quite a few outliers. Rios, Benson, Gallego, and Lung, they had pit stops of 20 seconds or more, up to 25 seconds stopped in the box, so they were obviously getting other stuff done other than fuel.
Yeah, so drivers taking all sorts of stuff down in pit lane, whether or not they are taking some tires to just try and improve their grip a little bit for the final blast of the checkered flag. They're bringing in a bottle of water, a bag of chips, whatever it may be. They're still going to be thinking about those tires. I got to imagine around a track like this as well, 16 corners and all, and some very fast bends. I mean, you think of the Schumacher S, you think of some of these corners that just drag on forever in these race cars, and especially that final chicane as well. These tires are probably screaming in pain when these drivers decide to bring their cars into the pits. So certainly wouldn't blame these drivers at all if they decide to take a bit more time, call in an audible, and put some new rubber on their race cars.
Yeah, indeed. We did mention at the top of the show that the Grand Prix circuit is actually surprisingly low in terms of grip. You know, all you have to do is load up a test session with the 24-hour layout, and you realize you go across the GP circuit, get onto the Nordschleife, and suddenly, it feels like your car has twice the grip. It's very interesting indeed, and I think that's largely due to the composition of the tarmac. It means that the tires slide a bit more easily on this layout. So yeah, potentially tire changes are a factor here, but in terms of how long they can hold on to the pace, usually in these 1 hour races, it's pretty good. So tire changes, I believe, are pretty rare in this series, but it's always an option if you're looking for that little bit of extra pace.
I think there may be a rhyme or reason as to why this track has that low grip. You mentioned the composite of the asphalt. From my experience on iRacing, I feel like all of the F1 tracks somehow have a just shockingly low amount of grip. I mean, Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, for instance, from my experience of it, I've had more grip driving the Dallara IR01 on a rallycross layout of Daytona or something like that than I ever got driving a normal car around a normal layout of Barcelona. So I don't know what it is about the F1 tracks in this sim that just feels like you're driving on ice. Either way, though, certainly going to be another thorn in the side for these racers. Reminds me of my days tending to my garden in the backyard of my house, which is not a good comparison at all with the amount of thorns sticking out the sides of these drivers.
Yeah, they'll be picking roses without gloves when the next lot of traffic comes around. On board with Heiberger, meanwhile, he's keeping the gap nice and close with his teammate Luke Wallace here. Of course, Heiberger won the first round quite convincingly, but then Luke Wallace came across on top at Daytona. Can Heiberger strike back as our leader is in the lane now? Timothy Larson has decided it is time, and so has Brandon Wilson. They've responded to each other in the perfect way. First pit stall right at the end of the pit lane. In comes Wilson behind Larson. And it is the battle of the pit crews. Interesting to see that Wilson is going up on the jacks, but Larson is not. This is an interesting call here. I think Wilson might be deciding to take tires. Either that, or he's messed up his pit call there, and he didn't intend to take tires. Larson is going to get a massive advantage here, as his pit stop was some 5 seconds faster than Wilson's.
Yeah, Wilson only just rejoining the racetrack now as Larson is heading into turn number 3 in a few moments. So Larson, I gotta say though, honestly, in terms of talking about these drivers maybe taking tires in their stop, if anyone's gonna feel confident in the way their car is driving between now and the checkered flag, it probably is going to be Timothy Larson. We've talked about the fact he was the fastest in practice, fastest in qualifying, and has led this race for a vast majority of it. Really, this cycle through the pits is the only reason why Larson can't lead from lights to flag. Graham Wildman currently leading it at the moment in the number 53 car in the GTP category, but Larson maybe feeling just exceptionally confident in the way that car is driving could be part of the reason why he decided against taking tires compared to some of his competitors.
Yeah, he's just trying to keep the gap out to a reasonable amount, so that if those tires do start going off at the end, then he has that margin to work with. So a very interesting battle between our GTP front runners. Keep an eye on Graham Wildman now as he finds himself in the chicane up behind the Majors esports car of Mr. Alex Crow, and out of the final corner he comes. That's not going to be much of an issue there. No pace lost for either of them, and Wildman is going to continue on for some time here. Now, the gap between Timothy Larson and Brandon Wilson is out to about 12 seconds now. This is going to be very interesting indeed. It's an intriguing battle that we're having at the front of this field, and to say nothing of the LMP2 podium battle that we haven't checked in on a while. These guys are continuing on quite some time. Looks like 43 minutes now that these guys have been going from the start of the race. Caruso, Barrera, Brewer, and Shreves, they have been absolutely extending this stint, going quite a while longer than I expected.
Yeah, they've been very, very good about their fuel savings. So who knows, come time for the end of this race, if one of these drivers have been incredibly good about that, or they pulled a Smokey Unic and have the fuel line wrapping around the car about 6 times, they may be able to make it to the checkered flag. I doubt it very highly. I don't think iRacing is that far enough along in their simulation just yet. Keyword being yet, maybe, potentially, perhaps. Oh no, that's probably a terrible idea, but still, these racers giving us a really good battle to talk about come time for the end of this race, and they've been covered by nothing throughout a decent chunk of this as well. Really awesome, the fact that a battle like this can just remain as intense as it has ever since the drop of the green flag. As you can see, these racers are just battling tooth and nail and trying to figure out their strengths and weaknesses at this point, as the run-ins with traffic are still continuing. I think with about 16 and a half minutes left to go in this race, these LMP2 runners will certainly have to think about some GT3 cars, as that was nearly a disaster involving Matt Brewer heading off through turn number 3. You can see him all sorts of sideways, slideways, coming out of the arena section. But I think for the LMP2 runners, they probably have one more encounter with the GTP runners to deal with as well, and also the GT3 is going to be a consistent thorn in their side. So for the P2 battle, it is still not going to be a smooth run to the checkered flag.
No, and it's anything but smooth here for Austin McGill, who actually has an iRacing issued black flag. I think he might have exceeded the incident limit. It's a very tight incident limit in PRL races before you get a penalty, and it looks like Robert McGeehan might be dealing with the same thing. Eduardo Aguiar and Matthew Wyckoff also have black flags to their name thanks to incident points. So they're starting to fall under the auspices of the automated stewarding system here, as our GTP leader finds his way through on yet another GT3. Joseph Blommel, meanwhile, with an issue here, spinning all by himself as he was getting pressured by Leo Lum.
I gotta say though, Reese, that's not the first time we've seen a driver have a moment like that, as coming into the pits is Matt Brewer in the LMP2 category, doing so from 3rd at the moment. That's gonna be a mandatory call, but an interesting one nevertheless. Let's see how that shakes out for the driver of the 2. But getting back to the point that I was going to raise in terms of that sideways snap for the GTP runners, gotta say, Reese, that's not the first time I've seen a driver get that sideways heading through that section of the circuit. That quick back and forth in these GTP race cars, which aren't the lightest things in the world, to say the very least. That quick back and forth through turns number 3 and 4, not going to be these drivers' friends, doubly so considering the weird layout of the asphalt there as well. You got like a change in camber, you got a change of elevation as well. It's an odd section of racetrack, to be sure. There's really nothing in the world like the arena section of the Nürburgring Grand Prix layout. It's still a very unique track and a fun one, as well as a near disaster involving a GT3 runner of Robert McGeehan, and also the GTP right behind.
That's Brandon Wilson. He's coming back in.
Oh,
Hang on a
why
minute.
is he coming back in?
Oh, he's got an
penalty?
iRacing black flag as well. Yeah. Incident limit penalty for Brandon Wilson. Oh, no. He made a bit of contact there with McGeehan as he was coming in, and I think that might have put Brandon Wilson over the incident limit there.
Yeah, the incident limit, I believe, being 15x, and with that small little tap, that's going to break him over. That a heartbreaker for the driver of the 444 car, and really no time left to go to try and recover like that. Only 13 and a half minutes left on the clock. Fitting that we're talking about this with lucky number 13 minutes left to go in this race as he goes off the track yet again. To anyone newcomer to the series, looking through the rule book and talking about the incident point violations, you got to drive through every 5 incident points after that 15 limit. So having these off-track excursions, Brandon Wilson really got to be careful between now and the check the flight, and that was big contact, and that's going to be a game changer for Wilson. Yeah, you can see that last minute call. That may end up being an unsafe pit entry penalty as well.
Yeah, I think it will be for Brandon Wilson. That is crazy. Wilson coming off winning the first 2 rounds of the season running. He was dominant at Daytona. He was very close with Larson at Hockenheim, but now that has given a massive free kick to Timothy Larson, who continues to lead the way from Nathan Ray and Graham Wildman, who now round out our podium. A fantastic potential result for those two there in the 35 and the 53. And oh my God, okay, LMP2 spun in the middle of the final corner. That's Eric Harmon.
Now, Harmon, a very scrappy racer I have experienced commentating over in the past. Very good driver, do not get me wrong, but sometimes he can over-push the boundaries a little bit. I think we just had a moment like that. Heading off into turn 16, let's take a look at his contact with a GT3. A clumsy move, a last-second dive. That's also going to result in the GT3 spinning around, but Harmon, I wouldn't say that's a move of pure desperation because it was running in a good spot, but a last-second move that's just going to play out as bad as it could possibly go.
Yeah, that's very sad, and but you know that just goes to show this is the big thing that that goes through multi-class racing is you need to be able to judge the incident, and sometimes that can be very hard when you're coming out of a fast corner into a braking zone like that with a very short straight. It's often difficult to predict what the GT3 is going to do. Man, I think that would have been part of what happened there to Eric Harmon, but also I think the Porsche that he turned around will be feeling a bit miffed themselves that he tried to go for the dive. Well, regardless, we continue on here. The battle for 8th place in GT3. Adam Ostrich and the Porsche here ahead of Devon Young in the McLaren. And Devon's already had plenty of adventures here so far. Less than 11 minutes to go in this race, and we could see a potential move. They've got Eric Harmon coming up on them in the LMP2. This is going to be difficult here coming through this kink here. Harmon's going to go to the inside. You'll see him pop into view right here. Just about. There he is. And
Beautiful.
Well, Devon will be hoping that he gets compromised there too.
That was beautiful timing there, Reese. Well done. But Harmon getting involved in this fight, to be sure. And some more prototypes getting involved in that. That right there, I believe, is Rios, unless I'm very much mistaken, getting involved in the fight as well. That's the thing when it comes to these lower class battles, whether it be in LMP2 or whether it be in GT3, the entire trajectory of your side-by-side fight with another car could be decided by the whims of someone in a completely different class. And that's always a unique part of multi-class sports car racing. Makes it exciting, to be sure. And I gotta say, with only 10 minutes left to go on the clock, the past 50 minutes of racing action have been absolutely fantastic. And to all of you tuning into this broadcast here on RaceSpotTV, if this action doesn't give you a reason to subscribe, I really don't know what would, because this racing has been phenomenal. But in the final 10 minutes, with that shameless plug out of the way, we've still got a lot left to be decided.
Yeah, we do. A bit wide there for Gallego in the Tachyon Ferrari. He's going to lose some time from that. Yeah, worth pointing out that if you are enjoying this, we broadcast all series that the Precision Racing League currently runs, and it is most of the week, running through from Sunday to Thursday. Magnificent amount of series, almost every night of the week here on RaceSpotTV. Well, keep an eye on Gallego as he tries to recover from that spin. And Brandon Wilson has not come out of the pits since he came in for that second time. I think the 444 might be using this as a drop round. No chance that he would even finish on the podium and get the points he needs to maintain that championship battle. So he's going to take the L on this one.
Yeah, I can't necessarily blame him for that. After getting hit with 2 black flags, yeah, there he goes. Stopped in the pit stall. Can't blame him at all. Actually, I think he's now rejoining the race, so surprisingly so. Maybe just use the second black flag as a bathroom break opportunity, but nevertheless, rejoining the track, surprisingly so. I thought he was on lunch break.
Yeah, I thought he'd retired from that point, but okay, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Wilson will come back out and see the checkered flag, but he'll finish no better than 13th place with the gap that he currently has over Joseph Blommel and with the damage that he currently has. 8 minutes to go, and the Valhalla Cadillacs here in GTP fighting their way along. Matt Benson and Austin McGill. Benson having a very good run through the field. He's up 8 spots from where he started, and one of those, of course, benefited by Austin McGill taking his penalty, but you can see that McGill clearly has a pace advantage over his teammate and is trying to find his way through, but they got GT3 traffic to contend with as well.
Yeah, that GT3 traffic just absolutely terrifying for some of these GTP cars. Look at the speed differential between those 2 classes of cars, a GTP and a GT3. You'll have to change one character out of their class names to get the other one, but it is still a world of difference between those 2 classes. Just comparing the pole times in each class, Timothy Larson and the GTPs set a 137.8 in qualifying earlier on, and the GT3s, on the other hand, the pole time was a 153.9. So a huge difference in terms of pace, and you can really see it put on full display with these close encounters.
It's Valhalla versus Valhalla here. The GT3 is a Valhalla car as well. I don't know if it's Kaufhold or Matthew Wyckoff there, but that certainly brought the Cadillacs closer together as they make their way through on the LMP2, side by side between the teammates. One of them is going to have to give this one up, and it looks like it's going to be Matt Benson giving way to Austin McGill there. Austin obviously thinking about his final position there, and Matt Benson probably thinking, okay, I'm already up a fair amount. I can let my teammate go and try and make some recovery from his earlier penalty. Oh, that was a good bit of action though.
Yeah, that was very, very good for the viewers, for us in the commentary booth. Probably not good for our vocal cords, but hey, we're not complaining one bit. That was beautiful stuff. Very clean as well. Gotta say, around a racetrack like this, tight confines, you got the runoff area, but again, it's a tight, twisty racetrack with practically no room to run or hide. Really, that start-finish straightaway is a point where these drivers have the most amount of time to just take a break and relax, which in a GTP car, it's probably, about 10 seconds hang down the start-finish straightaway. So practically no time at all for these drivers to even think about anything else outside of racing. But this race has been incredibly clean. The standard of driving in the PRL is absolutely brilliant. And credit where credit's due to the stewarding team as well behind the scenes at the PRL for keeping these drivers in a line. Believe me, I have some experience doing some race officiating for multi-class sports car racing, and it is a thankless job if ever I saw one. But still, despite the fact it's clean, these drivers are racing oh so hard and giving us some close battles into just about every single corner around this track as well, Reese.
Yeah, indeed. Stephen Finch battling with Miguel Rios up the road there in GTP, just making their way past, I believe that might have been Alex Caruso that they found their way through on there. Caruso is enjoying a 16-second gap over Alex Crow, who's miraculously found his way back to second. But don't forget, Alex Crow might have to take another pit stop here. In fact, having said that, there's only 5 minutes left in the race. there's potential here for Alex Crowe to be able to get through to the finish from here, because we saw how long that first stint was for the rest of the LMP2s. Maybe that was a perfectly executed maneuver there from Crowe, and he might have just gotten himself a second place finish from what looked to be a disaster at the start. We'll have to wait and see as Adam Ostrich and Devin Young continue their battle for 8th in GT3.
Yeah, that early call to come into the pit from Crowe in that 990 car may have been a masterstroke at the end of the day. We'll have to wait and see how things shake out. Maybe clutching at straws. I'm curious, Hugo, if we can maybe ride on board with Crowe in the not-too-distant future to hear if he's lifting heading into the corners, trying to exercise any sort of fuel-saving tactics. Gotta say, though, that gap between himself and Caruso is maintaining about the same side. Don't think Crowe is necessarily taking it easy, so I think he's just timed that to absolute perfection, realizing, hey, around a racetrack like this with the amount of lap traffic encounters, I mentioned the stat earlier, it was every 370 feet. If the field was completely evenly spread out with the 45 cars we have around here, that fuel saving was maybe going to be easy for these LMP2s. But let's listen in, heading into the corner. No, he's still attacking it just about the same. So Alex Crowe, as you can see, a spinner right in front of him. That's not ideal for Crowe at all, but he's not exercising any fuel saving tactics. So I think this may have just worked out perfectly for the 990.
Yeah, I think it might have. I mean, it would have been borderline at the very least. It also depends on when the GTP leader crosses the line to begin the final lap. You know, there's a chance, I think it's stronger for the GT3s than the LMP2s, but there is a chance that the lower classes will have to go a lap extra than what they projected. So we have to keep that in mind in the final 3 minutes as well.
That is a very, very good point that he raised there, Reese. I've done plenty of broadcasts of some races where a driver in a timed race crosses that start-finish line to take the white flag with 1 second left on the clock, and then as a result of that extra one lap, a lot of drivers run out of gas around this racetrack, or any racetrack for that matter, where that sort of situation may befall. May end up seeing it here today. I'm looking through to try and see if we may find ourselves in that position. I'm going to try and find where our overall leader of Larson is out on the racetrack as it stands currently. He's coming out of the arena section right now, so I believe once he crosses that start-finish line next time by, it may actually be a little bit close between whether or not he's taking the white, or two to go. Either way, though, it's maybe giving some of these drivers a bit more stress than they maybe thought they were going to get out tonight.
Well, 2 minutes to go, and Timothy Larson has just completed half of a lap, so he's going to cross the line with, I'd say, about 1 minute and 10 to go or thereabouts. So I think we won't see any danger of having to go an extra lap here. So keep an eye out regardless. Still got Rios and Finch battling here. They're the only battle on track apart from Ostrich and Young for 8th in GT3. So the field's spread out quite a bit here at the end. Still a couple of positions yet to be decided, and there's still time for someone to make a mistake and throw all of that out the window.
Yeah, at this point in the race, a mistake would not only be a game changer and a game ender in some cases, it's just going to be heartbreaking. So these drivers may be exercising a bit of patience and tiptoeing around this racetrack. They still want to battle hard, yet at the same time, you don't want to crash out with less than a minute to go. So some of these racers may be walking around on eggshells at this point in time. Either way, less than a minute left to go in this 1 hour long race. Larson's on the white flag. He's hanging his way through the arena section right now as we go back to this battle on the GT3s involving Devin Young and the number 15 McLaren, who are running on board with, heading down into the final corner for one of the last times in this race. And there's going to be a really exciting run to the checkered flag.
Yeah, it's going to be a magnificent final lap between these two. Young in the slipstream of Ostrich, and we'll see if he can get any closer in the braking zone for turn one. They have to deal with a GTP finding their way through as well. Nice tight turn in for the first corner here on board with the McLaren, and now you got to try and keep the momentum up. As I mentioned earlier, get on the power a bit earlier than you expect. Some oversteer there for Young in the McLaren. His rear tires are hurting through the initial stage of this circuit. Graham Wildman coming through there in third place in GTP, and it looks to me like Young might not have the have what it takes there to make his way past Ostrich. Stephen Finch, though, still in touch with Miguel Rios, and one mistake from Rios can throw this battle all the way out of the water. Meanwhile, Timothy Larson entering the final corner. He tried at Hockenheim. He couldn't make it to the finish at Daytona, but finally, he takes his first victory of the season here in 2025 Season 1. Timothy Larson is your GTP winner in the PRL, GTP, LMP2, and GT3 series. And wow, what a great victory for Luke Wallace in GT3 as well. Second one running at Daytona and Nürburgring. He reigns supreme. Derek Heiberger finishing in second place, so that is top 2 for Hyperion. Meanwhile, the battle for the GTPs is still on here. Stephen Finch trying up the inside of Rios now, but Miguel is very aggressive into the corners. He can hold on to that pace. Can they make it any further forward here in that Acura? Gently does it towards the end of the lap. They've got some cars trying to figure themselves out up ahead of them. Who will come off the best here? There's no passing opportunity at the chicane. Stephen Finch, I think, is going to have to stay behind Rios here. He's going to get slowed up at the final little margin there, but Rios will protect 5th place. What a battle between them to the end. And ultimately, Adam Ostrich winning the battle for 8th in GT3 over Devin Young, as Alex Caruso, just behind them, crosses the line to win yet again in LMP2. Congratulations to Alex Crow, though. Despite his issues at the start, he managed to play the strategy perfectly and still get a 2nd place from that.
That was a masterful drive from Alex Crow. It may not be the victory, but it's going to feel like a win in his book. Started this race backwards, running well farther back than when he was meant to start. Got involved in an incident, hang through the final corner, even before the drop of the green flag. But Crow putting on a professional recovery drive to make his way up to 2nd at the checkered flag. Well done to all the drivers throughout this field. What an awesome race here, Reese.
Yeah, what an awesome race indeed. Well, those are your GTP results there across the line. Timothy Larson, 21 seconds ahead of Nathan Ray, and Graham Wildman getting on the podium. The Graham Cam fan club in the YouTube chat will really enjoy that one. Bradley Holly finishes in 4th, with Rios taking 5th place, and Stephen Finch finishing just behind him. But Finch apparently had a black flag on the final lap. We'll see if that affects the results going forward. Austin McGill and Matt Benson in the Valhalla Cadillac finished 7th and 8th, with Darian Roy and Mauricio Gallego rounding out of the top 10. Leo Lung a lap down with Joseph Blommel and Brandon Wilson. And then we had absolute pain for Jeff Evans, Casey O'Brien, Aaron Beaver, and Aiden Hill. Real shame for all of them. Could not make it quite to the finish, but Jeff Evans did make it back out onto the track. Alex Caruso, 8 seconds ahead of Alex Crow. I think that's the narrowest winning margin in LMP2 so far this season. Again, brilliant stuff from Alex Crow to recover from his start incident. Justin Barrera once again getting onto the podium in LMP2. He'll be happy with that one as Brewer and Goodson round out the top 5. Harmon, Henneman, Shreves 6th, 7th, and 8th, with Cabana and Bergquist rounding out the top 10. Bergquist recovering well from an internet issue early on. 2 laps down, we had 2 retirements from the LMP2 class, Dave Seats and Kevin Burrows. Couldn't quite get it done there. Luke Wallace and Derek Heiberger, Hyperion Racing, top 2. Brilliant stuff from the team once again. They have dominated GT3 so far this season and will continue that run. Jim Felice gets on the podium for the first time this season in the SRTE green Acura. Evan McKay in the McLaren behind him, with Tony and Joey Costello in the SRTE orange cars, 5th and 6th. Jeff Kaufhold finishes 7th in the Valhalla Ferrari, with Adam Ostrich defending from Devin Young in the final laps for 8th place. David Schmidt rounding out of the top 10. And then moving to Matthew Maturo and Matthew Wyckoff, only cars to finish on the lead lap in GT3. Willie Brennan 3 laps down. Eduardo Aguiar, Robert McGeehan and Bryce Bombeck suffered issues over the course of the race. Man, what an event, and what a chat it is going to be here with our winners here, as we can welcome Timothy Larson to the commentary box. Timothy, congratulations on your victory. The season was a bit patchy for you so far, 2nd at Hockenheim, but had to ultimately retire from Daytona. Finally getting this first win must feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting, that was. Yeah, everything just went so well this race. The setup felt amazing. The traffic was better than ever, and everything just went my way.
It certainly did, and the decision not to take tyres certainly benefited you there as well. Well, going forward, hopefully, there's more battles to come between you and Brandon Wilson. Congratulations, Timothy, and we'll hopefully catch you next round.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Timothy Larson, winner of GTP there. We're going to catch up with the ever-popular Nathan Ray in GTP as well, stood by with Ron Mons.
Yeah, Nathan Ray now joining us in the commentary booth. Nathan, welcome in here and talk us through a hectic one here at the Nürburgring.
It was certainly a race. I was watching a whole lot of scary moves being put on a whole lot of people basically the entire time. I'm just sitting there going, this is an hour, guys.
Yeah, it was very, very hectic. I was honestly surprised how a lot of the drivers were treating this race with the hecticness that it did, but still end up with a pretty good result when everything is said and done. And Nathan, excited to see you back out on the track for the rest of the season. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Lovely stuff from Nathan Ray. And, well, I'm waiting for the chat to erupt here because we can welcome Graham Wildman to the interview booth for the first time this season. Podium for you, Graham. It certainly didn't look that way at the start, but it was a very attrition-filled race in GTP.
Yeah, if you had told me at the beginning of today with the struggles I was having this week that ended up on the podium, I would have been more than happy.
Absolutely. It all came down to battling, strategy, pretty much everything. This race had everything. Do you think there's more podiums on the cards for you at remaining rounds?
Most definitely. Daytona was a good run from last on the podium. This is another good run from middle of the pack. So hopefully if I can get my qualifying sorted out, maybe I can fight for a win.
Thanks for joining us, Graham.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
It's Graham Wildman taking third place in GTP. And, well, we can welcome, with Ron, Alex Caruso back to the victory once again in LMP2.
Yep, Alex Caruso, your winner in LMP2, joining us in the commentary booth. And now, Alex, there was a little bit of a gap between yourself and the P2 finisher, but that was still a really hectic one here at the Nürburgring. Talk us through it.
Yeah, it was a tough race, and that start was unfortunate. That's not the way that I wanted that race to go. I was definitely looking forward to having a good battle with Alex Crow, and I've got to give a big shout out to him. I mean, that recovery drive was seriously impressive. I think he was all the way at the back of the grid and somehow came up and finished P2. That's an awesome race from him. So for me, I knew I'd kind of had a gap to the rest of the field after those first few opening laps, so it was really just about staying conservative, trying to avoid getting any penalties or X's, and just kind of running my race from there.
Well, it's a very good and effective strategy for you, taking the checkered flag, the winner in the LMP2 category. Alex, also a fantastic sportsman there as well. Thank you very much for joining us in the commentary booth, and excited to see you back out on the track for the rest of the season.
Thank you, guys.
Alex Caruso there. And, well, we can welcome Alex Crow to the LMP2 podium as well. Alex, that pole position was magnificent. It all went wrong for you coming up to the green flag, but it seems the strategy played it perfectly for you to get second in the end.
Yeah, it did not look good before coming to the green flag there. Managed to work my way up pretty quickly. Seemed to be on the back of the group for P2 within, I don't know, I think it was 4 or 5 laps there. I felt a little held up by them, and it was just about to get too much to get around them with traffic coming from both sides in a couple laps. I took the gamble, pit early. It looks like it paid off. Came out with a pretty good few second gap over that group that I was fighting.
Well, an excellently executed race in spite of your early issues, Alex. Congratulations, and see you next round.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, we can also welcome Justin Barrera back to the commentary booth here. Ron, you stood by with our third place in LMP2.
Yep, Justin Barrera joining us now in the commentary booth. Now, Justin, I've said this in every single interview I've had thus far, a hectic one here at the Nürburgring. Talk us through it from your perspective as a GT3 driver.
Well, as an LMP2 driver, it's all right.
The one thing that I say screwed it up as an LMP2 driver. My apologies.
Yeah, so we had a really poor qualifying, and then all of a sudden the seas parted on the last corner before the start of the race, right at the start of the race. So we just went to second, And then we had a wheel disconnect in the race, so I went from second to fifth, and I just tried to keep it together and go forward. And that's really what the story was about, and I'm happy enough to get a podium position after starting 10th place.
I will give myself a racing commentator's excuse and say the last time I think I covered a race that you were a part of, you were running in a GT3. So that was my reasoning. I'll stick to it. I'm just dumb. But Justin, thank you very much for joining us in the commentary booth. And well done on the podium at LMP2.
Yeah, thank you guys. I just wanted to shout out a couple of people, ZPM, Friends, and Sudi. Appreciate it all.
Well, Justin Barrera will be very happy with another podium on the books for him. And we can welcome Luke Wallace to the booth again with another victory in GT3. Luke, once again, Hyperion on top, but you had one less car with you this time. But regardless, the battle with Derek all the way through was scintillating.
Oh, yeah, it was quite a battle with Derek. He had insane pace, and so what I had to do to combat that was just make my setup a little bit more on the sketchy side, which turned out to be working all right.
Yeah, certainly worked out all right for you with, I believe, taking the championship lead in GT3 with that second victory on the cards. So good stuff going forward, Luke. Congratulations and best of luck for the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Luke Wallace there with Derek Heiberger joining us next. Ron stood by with our P2 finisher in GT3.
Yeah, Heiberger now in the commentary booth with us. And now, Derek, I'm going to ask the question that I was going to ask Justin Barrera, the LMP2 third place finisher, a couple of moments ago. Talk us through the hectic one here at the Nürburgring from your perspective as a GT3 driver.
That was wild. I mean, we were just having to lift pretty much everywhere. Traffic management was 90% of the race, which kind of expected going in. I think Luke did an awesome job on traffic, so he got the win, well deserved. And I got to give credit to Jim behind for giving me a hard time on pace as well, because it was just a tough race up front.
Yeah, it looked like a really tough battle for all of you drivers up and down the grid, but you come out of it with a P2 result here at the Nürburgring. I'm sure you're very happy about that. But Derek, thank you very much for joining us in the commentary booth, and hope to see you back out on the track for the rest of the season.
Yep, thank you, guys.
Derek Heiberger there, and finally we can welcome Jim Felice to the booth. First podium of the season, Jim. An SRT green certainly had a consistent race through this one. How did the Acura treat you?
Felt pretty good. I think, the Nürburgring's not necessarily one of my favorite tracks, but the Acura seems pretty stable, pretty composed, and just pretty good all around this season. So felt good out there.
Certainly did, and the traffic was certainly a factor as well. It seemed like no one had any opportunity to rest.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the fun things about multi-class racing is there's always something going on. I think for my part, it was fairly uneventful, which is usually the way you want it in a multi-class race. So, mixed it up with the Hyperion guys a little bit at the start, but, I think they're quite quick up there. It's going to be tough to beat those guys this season, and, just having a lonely race in third wasn't too bad at the end of the day.
Yep, a result is a result, and third place is yours, Jim. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And that's going to round out our driver interviews for this round, Ron. Thank you very much for joining me for this one. Road America is going to be the next round of the season. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for rest around here.
Yeah, a little bit more of that track clicking over at 4 miles in length. Those long straightaways going to give these drivers' arms a little bit of a rest and give their minds a bit of a rest as well. I think these racers are very much going to enjoy this week break between this and the next round of the season. But Road America going to be a fantastic one. I may be a little bit biased since I'm the American on this show, but Road America, an absolutely wonderful racetrack and a brilliant one to host the 4th race of this season.
Yeah, looking forward to it, and we hope you are too on the YouTube stream. Thanks very much for joining us for this round of the Precision Racing League GTP, LMP2 and GT3 series. I'm Reese Gardner, Ron Mons joining me in the commentary box, Hugo Luis, always putting on a great production behind the scenes here on RaceSpot. We'll see you next time.